Hey, what's up guys? It is Dan from FightWave, and today I'm joined by somebody I am very excited to speak with. If you guys know anything about me, you know I love South African MMA, and this guy is none other than one of the biggest catalysts for South African MMA. You know, there was a time where people were looking at him as the biggest guy in the sport, and he still is one of the biggest guys in the sport. They were looking at him as literally like a Conor McGregor of South Africa. You know, he had that kind of level of influence. He still does have that kind of level of influence. And he's been an incredibly influential figure in South African MMA. Today I'm joined by none other than South African lightweight Don Madge, who has fought for the UFC and PFL. How you doing today, Don?
I'm very well, man. Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise, man. And I always, like, you know, I tell everyone this. I tell them, I say, South African mixed martial arts, the fans are the best, and the fighters are some of the most humble and modest human beings I've ever heard and I've ever met in this sport. You yourself, no exception. A great guy, a great human being, a great father, everything of the sort. Talk to me, obviously, about how you're feeling and how's everything been, man.
Yeah, man. I think I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Is that in South Africa we grow up with respect and we grow up with humility and you're never big. No man's ever bigger than another man. So that's kind of like the lifestyle that we live out here, and it's something that I definitely try to carry forward and try maintain that humility, even though, like, in this game, it's tough to hang on to, especially when you're riding hype trains and you're riding the wave, you know what I mean? Um, but yeah, like, I'm just carrying on, man. I've had a couple really bad injuries in the last 2 years, so I'm trying to just get my body right so that I can start being a bit more active.
No, yeah, absolutely. And obviously, first and foremost, you mentioned obviously South Africa right now, and even way back when, like, you know, South Africa MMA from when you started in the sport to now, it's gone leaps and bounds. You know, it's exploded. Right now, momentum's at an all-time high in the UFC and the PFL across multiple different promotions. South African MMA's looked the best it's ever looked, and I mean, I can attribute that to guys like yourself, Garrett McClellan, Drickus, Cam, you know, so many other guys, JP. Everyone is putting in their due diligence and their part to grow the sport. What does it mean to you to have this level of camaraderie in the sport, and also just to be able to see South African MMA get to where it is now?
Man, it's incredible. Like, it's something that, like, all of us have always known here in South Africa. We always knew what our level was. We always knew that we had the ability to be in the top five, to be fighting for titles like Drickus. Like, we all knew that we could do that. It was just about getting that shine, And I think guys like myself and Gareth, who kind of got the momentum started for the guys, for the rest of the guys to come along. And now that we've got guys like Cam and Drickus that are out there, like, really running the flag high. I think it's shining a good spotlight on South African MMA, and I think the future looks incredible for South African fighters.
No, yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you know, you mentioned yourself and Gareth McClellan, guys who got into the UFC, got wins in the UFC. You obviously, unfortunately, not the way you kind of wanted to exit. You know, there was obviously some controversy when you left because everyone was a little surprised. You know, they're like, wow, this guy is like possibly a future top 15 guy. How is it that he's leaving the sport right now in the from the UFC going to the PFL? Can you just talk to us about that a little bit, just how that kind of came about?
Man, it was just like it was a combination of things. Like, I was I was so obviously, like, I had my fight in 2019 in Abu Dhabi in September 2019, and then COVID. Then I was literally in negotiations for a fight just before we got locked down. And in that fight, obviously, I broke my hand, so I was out. I was out for 3 months with no training, and then I had to start, like, rehab and get back into it. And then, just as I was starting to get back to training, then it was locked down. And then it was just basically like fight offers and then fights getting canceled and just like a lot of back-to-back issues that were kind of like stifling me. It basically set me back 2 years in my career where I couldn't really do much. And you know, I just don't think that the relationship gelled well enough with the UFC and myself. So I think it was just the best thing for me to step back and kind of just change the scenario, change the scenery, and just go somewhere else where there was a potential of, fighting 4 times in a year and winning $1 million and becoming a world champion. Like, that's always a really, really good opportunity as a fighter to be able to be guaranteed X amount of fights in a year, and also be guaranteed that after those 4 fights you can be a world champion. You know, I think like you see a lot of guys getting on like 12, 13 fight win streaks and never getting offered title fights. Um, and I think as a fighter, when you're fighting in that level of competition, like if you get on a win streak, you should be fighting for a title. And that was the major appeal for me for when I was talking to my manager about like what our next step was or what we were going to do, because I was at that point where I was like, okay, well if I keep doing all these training camps and getting canceled fights and getting guys pulling out and they're not having visa and like all this stuff, I was like, well, like what am I doing? I'm putting my body on the line here. I'm working really hard. Um, you know, I'm not making any money. I'm not like, you know, sponsors want to see you fight. Like it just becomes this like whole snowball effect. And I was like, you know, I got a kid on the way. I gotta make things work for me. So that was the best choice for me at the time, and I still believe it's the best thing that I could have done for myself in my career.
No, yeah, definitely. I know you beautifully put Don first and foremost, because I think oftentimes the priorities of fighters often it gets so tied into this allegiance with the UFC, or they have to stick with the UFC, otherwise their career is gonna be in the dumps. But I feel like you and obviously your manager Tim Simpson, somebody who is highly regarded in this sport and highly touted. Obviously, you're with him now as chosen advisory. You know, you guys look into and assess the best options for you career wise, and obviously the UFC is where everyone wants to be, but more importantly, it's important not just that, but to secure your safety and secure your future in this sport, because often fighters get so invested on, I have to make the UFC, that they end up going bankrupt in the process. They end up not having any money to support themselves, and like you said, there's so much more to fighting. You have a kid on the way. Obviously, your kid's here now. Congratulations, first and foremost. God bless you and your family.
Thank you.
And just more importantly, you have to take care of a lot of different things outside of the fight game. It's just a lot to take in, and I love that you kind of put the priorities first and foremost above the fighting career, so and so and so hold, but because that's just how it is. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. So, tell me about obviously how that decision has impacted you since, and what it's been like to be a PFL fighter.
Yeah, man. I think that happens with like a lot of fighters, especially like younger fighters, is that you get so driven that the UFC becomes the only option. And you know, now like back maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was the only option to like really make like a real career in the sport. But like nowadays, with like the PFL, with the UFC, with Bellator, with One, you've got so many different options to really make it as, and not even just with MMA. Like you see jiu-jitsu's taken off now. Guys are making full-time careers out of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I think just like combat sports in general has exploded, and the interest from like an entertainment standpoint is just like through the roof at the moment. But going back to the question, PFL is incredible. Like they've been really, really awesome. They were super cool with everything, like with our negotiations and coming from one contract to the next contract. And Ray Sefo is really awesome to work with. He's been really helpful, even like with my injuries and like pulling out of the season and stuff. Like he's always been cool, and he's always been like very welcoming. And I really, really appreciate being a part of the PFL. And like you mentioned, Tim, he's the best in the game, man. I don't know where I'd be without Tim. He's kept me in it like mentally as well when things were really like starting to suck, like through COVID and through injuries and guys pulling out. He's kept me in mentally as well. So, I got big love for Tim, and that's why like when he started his own thing, I was like, you got to stick to the guys that stuck by you, and so that's how I've always been. So I was like, I got to stick with my man Tim because he stuck with me.
No, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned kind of more importantly sticking through it the rough times, and I feel like during COVID, I just think everyone took a step back almost and reassessed everything, because it was such a monumental time for the world. Obviously you had a lot of stuff going through. You literally changed promotions and a lot of other good stuff. And then I think if I remember correctly, you co-founded your own gym, Madge MMA. Talk to me about just taking a step back, more importantly, and assessing more of the beauty that life has to offer. Because I feel like oftentimes fighters get so sucked into the world of fighting that they kind of forget everything else around them and forget to cherish the moments that they've developed throughout their career. So talk to me about what it's been like just to co-found your own gym and just be able to have your own gyms at your helm, where you can influence the next generation of South African MMA, but also influence young kids, young adults, people coming up, just to be better human beings through the sport of mixed martial arts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, myself and my partner, we started Manfred in like 2015, but it was, it's not where it is now. I was I was obviously still like an up and coming like young fighter, and I was obviously just like out training, and I'm very fortunate to have a very good partner in Matt Leashing who held down the fort for me and continued to build the business while I was out accomplishing the things that I needed to do. But yeah, man, like you say, the thing that everyone seems to forget about fighting is that fighting ends one day, and you hate to see it like guys fighting past their prime or guys sticking around longer than they need to and not having anything else to sort of they never really make it to like the top 10 and they never make that like stardom phase and they have nothing really to like fall back on, and I knew from like a young kid I was like, I've always coached alongside training. It's just always been something I've done like throughout my Muay Thai career, throughout my MMA career. It's always been something that I've done um while being a fighter, even like living in South Africa, to because the MMA has only like exploded in the recent years. Um to make a buy, you had to coach in order to like make things make ends meet, um so it's always been something that I've thought about and I've kept in the back of my mind. Like, there's 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 obviously fighting and competing and making money and doing things like that. But there's also everything else that fighting brings and martial arts brings to your life other than just fighting. It's building a community, it's becoming a leader, it's influencing like you said, the younger generation and everyone else that needs that. Because I think what we need right now in the world is strong humans. And that's something that like we've kind of lost in the last generation or two is we've lost strong humans. And I want to make sure that the next generation of South Africans are strong humans. Um, you know, not everyone has like strong father figures, not everyone has like strong leaders around them. And I think that having a place like MadFit or a martial arts community in general to be able to be around strong sort of male figures, I think is really important, especially nowadays.
I mean, perfectly put. And I mean, first and foremost, you hit the nail on the head. Influencing that next generation is something that's so important. I feel like fighters like yourself have really been at the forefront of doing that. Being a vessel for, what it's like to be a strong human being, strong somebody who looks after their family, looks after the people around them, and looks to make a better difference in the world. And, in the day of social media, obviously, it's a very difficult task to have indeed. But I feel like now we're getting towards that point where the reset is kind of happening. And thank you so much, Don, first and foremost, for your time, for your energy, and just for everything you've done. Because I think it doesn't get said enough. Oftentimes it's fighters like you, who make that difference, who make that change, and like you and so many others from South Africa before you. You guys have been the catalyst and the pushing point towards making South African MMA what it is today. Obviously right now you're still healing. You're almost back to 100%. Talk to me about just some of your goals as a father, as a human being, and just as a fighter, if you have any. Not just fighting goals, but also goals just throughout what Don Madge wants to do in his life.
Hey, man, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It's always good to hear, and I've never really thought about it like that, but I really appreciate it. Yeah, in terms of goals as a fighter, like I'm a competitor. I'm a fighter. I've been fighting since I was 14 years old. It's just something that like I've always wanted to do. When I first started fighting, the idea of living or fighting and being like famous and stuff wasn't like a career. It was just something that you did like while you did it. So like that was never the goal was never like, oh, I'm gonna be famous, I'm gonna be like a superstar or anything. It was just like I'm just gonna fight because that's what I like to do. And, I've kind of kept that attitude throughout my career. It's like if I never want to be the guy that's fighting to be famous, the guy that's fighting to like be on, cereal boxes and stuff. Like that's never gonna be me. I'm the guy that fights because I have something to prove to myself. I have something to prove, to my family and to my team. Like that's the guy that I am, and that's what I'm gonna continue to do. Um, Obviously I'm out of the PFL season right now, but that the goal is always to chase another world title. I definitely know I can win a world title. It's just not something that's far from my reach, and I just got to be able to get on a run and try and. The problem with me is I train too much, so I don't do enough recovery. So my body just like eventually just says, okay, cool, we've had enough, and it breaks down on me. But I think that should be my first goal would be to take better care of my body. But then in terms of like my outside life, obviously I want to be a really good father figure for my son. I want to be a good example to him. So like I try to live my life in a way that I would like to for it to be seen by him. You know, every time I do something, I try and think like, if my son could see what I'm doing now, would it be something that he'd be proud of, or would it be something that he wouldn't be proud of? And my father passed away when I was very young, and I didn't have that guiding mentor leader to follow, and I was lucky to find it in martial arts and find it around mentors in martial arts. And I think like my major goal is to be that, sort of foundation in my son's life, and if I can do that through martial arts, that's great. And if he doesn't decide to follow martial arts, that I'll still support him, and I'll still try and lead him the right way. That's my main focus right now in my life, is just to be a good father and be a good husband, and and make sure that I'm doing everything right in my life.
Absolutely, and obviously a leader by example in every facet of your life. I want to thank you so much for your time, Don, because I'm humbled and honored first and foremost to be here and sit alongside you and be able to just speak with you. Because I often say so many times before, these interviews are so much more so perspective for myself, and while they're great content for the fans at home, I am always, humbled and honored and privileged by the perspective that I get from the fighters. So I wanted to thank you so much for just all the information and all just the good vibe, good energy that you've given me today. And to the fans at home watching, do be sure to check out Don Madge on social media. Support your local fighter. I know me and him were talking off air about taking a little bit of a reset or just really dialing into the life around us. And that's a good thing to say, is like social media isn't everything. But, do be sure to check him out. Keep in tune with when he has fight news, because I imagine that's going to be coming up very, very, very soon, whenever it may be. It's been me, Dan, from FightWave, guys. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this interview. Do be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and have an absolutely amazing day, guys.